Hello and welcome. My name is Paul Aubin, and today I'd like to present to you the view range feature in Revit Architecture 2010. To understand the way that Revit draws floor and ceiling plan views, it is important to remember that a floor plan is essentially a horizontal section cut through the building. However, unlike sections, which have graphics to determine where the section is being cut and which way they are looking into the model, a floor plan uses some preset defaults and defines them using a dialog box called the view range. The view range can be located by going to the view properties of a view and clicking on the view range button. And you'll see that there's a cut plane parameter, a bottom of a view range, and the top of the view range. To get a better sense about how each of these values behaves within a particular floor plan view, let's take a quick look at the section view here and understand the model that we have on screen. There are 3 levels in this project: a lower level at 0, a middle level at 5 feet, and a top level at 15. The floor plan view that we were just looking at is right here at the middle level. So it starts here at 0 to that current level. This red line here indicates the cut plane at 4 feet. This dashed blue line indicates the top of the range, here at 7'6", and of course this green line is the bottom of the range, which coincides with the level of itself. So the space between the blue line and the green line here is what's being included in the view range of that floor plan. You'll notice that we are cutting through windows in a variety of locations. We're cutting through walls. We're looking down on furniture, railings, and stairs. And we have a few items that are occurring up above our head. Furthermore, we're cutting through this small piece of roof over here. Some of these other items down in here are actually occurring below the bottom of the view range. But we have this double height space down in this area here, which we may want to include in the view itself. So let's return to the middle floor plan. As we said, here's the roof that we're actually cutting through. Suppose we didn't want to include that roof cut through in this floor plan. We could return to the View Properties command, locate the view range, and adjust the cut height to try and exclude that roof from view. So let's try a value of, say, 3 feet. This will move the cut height down, and let's click the apply and see what happens. Now, of course, when we make that change, we did succeed in removing the roof from the view. However, we've also lost a series of windows in a variety of locations around the plan. So perhaps not the most ideal setting. 3'3" appears to be the optimal value for the cut plane that still allows me to cut through the various windows but exclude the roof from the view. Let's direct our attention now to the bottom of the view range. It's currently set to 0 of the current level, which is that middle level. The middle level is at 5 feet relative to the building. So how can we start to get some of the items that are appearing in the double volume space over here to appear in the current floor plan view? Naturally, that would require our making modifications to the bottom of the view range. Let's start with a really modest change. Let's change the value to -1 foot. It should be noted that each of these values must occur in order. In other words, the view depth, which we'll talk about in a moment, has to be your lowest value, followed next by the bottom, then by the cut plane, and finally by the top. If you set the values in such a way that any of those end up in a different location relative to one another, Revit will complain. So right now, if I were to click apply, I would get an error regarding the view depths being too high above the current bottom. So I need to set the value of the view depth at least equal to the view bottom. Now when I do, an interesting thing will occur and may not be expected. Notice that the furnace does not display, the furniture does not display, but yet somehow the floor slab that's being used for the platform at the bottom of the stairs is suddenly appearing. Certain objects in Revit have their own special rules with respect to the cut plane. Floors actually will appear in a floor plan view if they're within a certain tolerance of the cut plane. That tolerance is approximately 4 feet. So in this case, when I dropped the bottom down to just simply 1 foot, it was enough to make that floor plan display in the current view even though it falls outside of the view range. Another interesting item would be the same case with this wall that we have here underneath the floor slab. If I went to the lower level floor plan, what you'll notice is that most of the walls appear here in bold because they're being cut through by the cut plane, but this wall that occurs actually slightly below the cut plane is appearing using its projection line style. Now it turns out that the projection line style would actually be used even if the wall were intersecting the cut plane but at a height of say 5 feet. I believe the limit is 6 feet. So notice that this wall at 5 feet tall is still appearing in beyond. If I change the wall to 6 feet tall, it now appears in cut. If I make a wall at 5'11", just shy of the 6 foot mark, you'll see that it appears as beyond. So even though all three of these walls are intersecting the cut plane, only this one appears in bold due to those special case rules. So some of the objects, including floor slabs, walls, and a few others, have their own special rules with respect to how they interact with the cut plane. Let's return to the middle floor now. Return to our view range. We know that the middle level is 5 feet above the other level, so let's go ahead and use a value of -5 feet here for both of these values and click apply. And that does the trick. We're now seeing the furnace and the furniture. They both appear here in the current view. Now, how does Revit decide how to draw these items? Let's go ahead and zoom in and take a look. If we take a visit to the Object Styles dialog, which is on the Manage tab, under Settings, Object Styles, we will see that most objects have, in the line weight column, two settings. They have a projection setting and a cut setting. For example, here's casework, ceiling, columns, and so on. If we scroll down to the bottom, our walls had a pen weight 2 when they were seen in projection, and they had a pen weight 5 when they were being cut through. That accounts for why the walls are bold here, but why they were thinner when we were looking down on them in the lower level plan. Now, if we look at things like electrical equipment, or in the case of our mechanical equipment, you'll notice that the cut column is grayed out. It's not available to edit. This is not considered a cuttable object by Revit. Therefore, the only setting that's available is projection, meaning that regardless of where this element appears within the primary range, it will always appear using a projection line style. So even if we were to drop the cut plane down to intersect this piece of equipment, it would continue to display in this thin pen weight 1. Now, why don't we adjust that to a pen weight 2, go ahead and click OK, and study the result. Notice that this is now slightly bolder than the furniture, which is still using a pen weight 1. There's actually a third pen weight that will come into play. So Object Styles exposes two of them, the projection style and the cut style. If we go back to the view range, cut style, as we've already discussed, occurs here at the cut plane. Projection style is being used here in the bottom of the range. The view depth, when enabled, is a setting that kicks in a third line style called Beyond. This is a built-in line style in Revit that we can modify, called Beyond, that is used for any object that falls within the view depth range. In order to see that, you need to do two things. First of all, you need to establish the view depth range as its own distinct range. The way we do that is by changing the bottom in such a way that the view depth occurs below the bottom. When both numbers are set the same, you essentially have no view depth. But when you change the two numbers so that you create space between those two ranges, then you create a view depth range. So that is step one. When I click apply, watch the furnace over in the background here very carefully. You'll notice that it dropped from a pen weight 2 down to a pen weight 1. Why did it do that? Well, the answer lies in the settings menu, under line styles, in the settings for the built-in Beyond line styles. As you will see, it uses a pen weight 1, black ink, and a solid line pattern. So if I move this slightly out of the way and we take a look, we could change the color if we wanted to, perhaps use a dark green color, click apply. We could even change the line pattern. And furthermore, if I zoom out, you'll notice that that effect doesn't apply just to the furnace. It actually applies to all of the items that fall within that range. If we return to the section view, what we've essentially done now is we've set the bottom of the view depth down here to the lower level, and we've left the bottom of the view range here at the middle level. Therefore, anything that falls between here and here is using that beyond pen style. That includes our furnace, that includes our floor slab, that includes our piece of furniture in this case. If we were to make use of that in a more practical setting, like here, we could start to make our footings display down below. So if we went to the view properties of this view, edited the view range, changed it to perhaps a -3 feet, and click apply, you'll see that now all of the footings will appear in that green dashed line down below the current view. Now let's discuss the final setting in our view range dialog, and let's talk about the top of the view range. The top of the view range comes into play with only a few select objects. Those objects are casework, generic models, and windows. Let's look at some examples. Returning to the section view for a moment, you'll see that we have 3 items mounted on the wall beyond. We have a piece of casework, we have a generic model, and we have a piece of specialty equipment. Now at the moment, in the floor plan middle level, we're only seeing the piece of casework. Now the reason we're not seeing the generic model is fairly obvious, because you'll notice that here it is mounted well above the top of the view range. Therefore, it's completely outside of the view range and not displaying. The casework, however, you'll notice, is not interacting with the cut plane at all, but because it occurs within the space between cut line and the top of the view range, and because it's a piece of casework, it does display. Specialty equipment, on the other hand, does not have this special behavior. Therefore, because it occurs between here and here, it does not display. If we were to go to the middle floor level, edit the view range, and raise the cut height, or 7 feet, you would see that we could get the specialty equipment to begin to display. That's the only way that we'll get the specialty equipment to display in the current view, is to actually make it intersect with the cut plane. However, the generic model and the casework will display on their own as long as they interact with, at the very least, the top of that range. So if I were to increase the top range here to even 8 feet in this case, you'll see that's enough to trigger the display of the generic model. Now windows actually share this behavior, but often we don't realize that because most windows are coinciding with the width of the wall. So your typical windows, when they occur above the cut plane, such as these windows over here, they don't display. But it turns out that if I were to take this window here, and let's just take a quick look, you can see where it's mounted currently. It's only 2 feet above the floor. If I were to move that to, say, 5 feet above the floor, placing it above the cut range, you'll see that it will no longer intersect the cut plane. However, you will see that the window does continue to display because it falls within that top portion of the view range. So again, looking at the section, that bay window is now occurring completely above the cut plane, but it does continue to display. The final thing to look at is what happens in a roof plan. Here I am looking at a roof plan view, and you'll notice that the roof looks a little odd. Okay, we are actually cutting through it here and here. Now, if we were to look at the elevation view of this building, you would notice that we've got a gable roof here, and if I were to simply add a detail line at about right there and change the height of that detail line to about 4 feet. That's what we're witnessing in the floor plan. That floor plan, that roof plan, is cut at this with the same default settings that we saw in the other floor plan views, and so 4 feet above the level it is intersecting this roof and cutting through it. But typically we would want to see the ridge instead. We wouldn't want to cut through the roof unless we were doing like an attic plan. So to change that, it's pretty simple. We just return to the view properties one more time, edit the view range one more time, and we want to increase this value high enough so that it gets up above the ridge. And in this case I've chosen a value pretty high. Now again, remember, if I click apply here, Revit will complain because this value is now higher than this value. So in order for this to work, you need them at least to be equal, or you want to make your top a little bit higher. And when you click apply, you'll notice that the roof now appears with its ridge line here. Now let's make one last adjustment. Let's drop the view depth down to maybe -10 feet and click apply, and you'll see I went a little too far. I got the ramp in here, but you're now getting that roof down below. Now unfortunately there's only one beyond line style for the project, as you can see, and it is displaying there in that green dashed line. Now to remedy that situation, I have two choices. I can either return to line styles and modify the way beyond looks to return it to a solid line, or I can actually go to my visibility graphics on the view tab, or type the VG shortcut on the keyboard, locate the lines item, expand it, highlight the beyond sub item, click the override button, and change the settings. So I can make it back to a black line and change it back to a solid pattern. Click OK, click OK again, and you'll see that in this view the line returns to a solid dashed line. If we zoom in slightly, you will see that there is a difference between this pen weight and this pen weight. Roofs and projection are using a pen weight 2. This is using beyond, which is a pen weight 1. So that gives us the effect that we're looking for, to show that this roof is actually occurring below this roof. And if I return to other floor plans, you'll notice that the beyond line style is still using the green dashed line. So it is actually possible to have it display in more than one way. What you want to do is go to line styles and set the default that you want to occur most of the time, and then override the other views as necessary. Now the final thing I want to talk about is what happens on ceiling plans. Now with the ceiling plan, the view range is reversed. So we still have a cut plane cutting through the geometry, giving us our bold line around the walls, as you can see here. It defaults to 7'6". The top of the view range behaves exactly the same way that it did in a floor plan view. It occurs above the cut plane. The only difference is the default settings here have it set relative to the level above instead of the same level at a 0 offset, which still places it above the cut plane, but it just does it in a slightly different way. If we were to take this number and drop it down slightly, you'll see that the roof here in the background is actually displaying in our ceiling plan view. This is because soffits of the roof intersect the top of this view range, making the roof appear. If we drop the top of the view range down slightly, like say -2 feet here, and click apply, you will notice that the line actually turned to the green dashed line. Now why is that? Well, the reason for that is the view depth in a ceiling plan is actually applied above the top rather than below the bottom as it is in a floor plan. So in a floor plan it appears here, as you can see it, down below the bottom. In a ceiling we'd almost like to take this setting and flip it up here because it occurs here up above the top. Because I changed this to -2 but did not change this value, I left it at 0, I've actually created a view range up above the top of this floor plan, and therefore triggered the roof to display in my dashed green line beyond style. It's the same beyond style that we're using in the other floor plans, and again, if you wanted it to appear differently here in your ceiling plan, you would need to go to visibility graphics and modify it. That concludes our exploration of the view range feature in Revit Architecture 2010. I hope you enjoyed it, and I thank you very much.